My mom has this birthmark across her face. I was in my 20s, I think, when mom did a reading. She was always doing readings with psychics and stuff. And she did a reading with this one medium who told her that she had been branded in a previous lifetime as a witch. And like,
goosebumps.
Yeah. And it was very much like, yeah, that's accurate.
But for you, it feels like a reclamation. And I know that took, I'm going to assume, courage to come out as a witch.
Yeah. I'm so drawn to the old ways, and I feel that old ways are being brought back because we're realizing how lost we've become.
And we're back.
We are back.
For the third time.
Third time.
The only guest to have ever come on the show 3 times.
So honored.
Well, it's just because I like you that much.
I love it. Yay.
And I love our conversations.
Oh, yeah.
And for everyone listening and or watching, if you have not heard or tuned into the previous episodes, there's episode 274, which is fucking amazing. I just re-listened to it yesterday. It's
Isn't that
so,
one?
so
That's
good.
Today, 274.
Oh, that is today. Hold on.
Which is right now, and it's
Which
amazing.
Is right now.
It hasn't
so
happened
good.
yet.
I promise. No, episode 235, Befriending the Dark, that we recorded after both our books were launched.
Yes.
And then there's episode 97 entitled We're All Empaths, because we are. Okay.
It's true.
And that was recorded, I believe, in 2018. Which was a year after my podcast came out. That one, unfortunately, you won't find on iTunes or Spotify because half my episodes were deleted when I did a changeover, but it's on YouTube.
Cool.
So if you want to watch the evolution of Chloe
And you.
and me, I would start there. Just hit pause and go listen to those episodes. And as for today, I feel like, I mean, we recorded our last episode in 2021. It is now 2023, but when I feel into it, it feels like we've both had crazy, like I don't even know the adjective to use here, just like an insane journey.
Massive. Yeah.
Since then that has taken each of us even deeper into the darkness while also really, I think we both always navigated with blinders in some way, shape, or form.
Right.
But this enforced that.
Yeah.
And I want to let's start with the books because I feel like that's where we left off.
I love it. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We both released our books in July 2021?
Yeah.
Sounds right.
Yeah. And I think it was like within a couple days of each other.
Literally.
Or was it might have even been the same day.
I think it was the same week.
Because I think mine was supposed to be a couple days after yours, but then you know how it is with Amazon, you submit it and then it's like, it'll come out in 72 hours. And I think yours came out and then I was like, mine's out too.
Yeah. And I know we both experienced quite the journey with the writing process, quite the journey with the birthing process. And then there's like this weird postpartum process.
Right.
And I would love for you to speak about your experience with that.
I mean, I think that my favorite part of the book was writing it because it was the most personal and like the most just me. And I tend to, this is something that I'm always like quite inspired by you because by the way, there's like a huge hawk flying, or I think it's a hawk.
That's a vulture.
Oh my God, of course. Of course. I'm like, I can't ignore that we've just got this like
For
dinosaur
those of you listening,
bird,
there's a vulture flying outside my window right now.
which is one of my guides. So perfect. But yeah, I'm always really inspired by you because of how you're very good at, it feels like you're very good at bringing people into the experience. I mean, we're doing a podcast right now, right? And I tend to be a little bit more, especially as I get older, I'm like quite introverted. And the way that I roll is like, once I've created something, continuing to like talk about it. And like, I always think about authors and how they do published like tours. And I'm like, I don't know if I could do that because once something is completed for me, it's completed. And so it's sort of hard for me to like go back and talk about it. So I remember after it being out, I had this, it was challenging to like read chapter, you know, like do things to market it. That was because, and I almost like would forget that I wrote the book. I'd be like, oh yeah, I forgot that I have this book here, because it was so personal, and because it's a psychic it's because it's a memoir. It really is. It's like deeply personal, and because as I was writing it, it kept changing because the title is Revealed by Darkness, and it was obvious. It was my story of growing up as a psychic and embracing my gifts as a medium. But what I sort of didn't realize when I started writing the book was that it was really about my initiation into death and darkness, which was led by the death of my dogs. And so it was like, as I was getting like finishing the book kept changing because first Blue died, and then we were ready to put it out, but then Ollie had cancer. So then I was like, oh fuck, I can't like not. Like Ollie's been my dog for 13 years, and I could feel Ollie being like, I need to be in this book. Like my death needs to be in this book. So, you know, having to like quickly write or Ollie's chapter. So it was so personal and really traumatizing, but in a very sacred way, kind of. It's a kind of weird thing to say. So when it was out, there was this level of like almost challenge with being super open and diving into the mainstream marketing sort of model, which is always like so challenging for me. I'm never good at that kind of shit, but you know, so you have all these like,
well, I don't think it's that you're never good at it. I think it just doesn't align for you.
It really doesn't align. Yeah.
Let's get that clear.
Thank you for
because I think there's also
that.
a lot of viewers and listeners who feel that way too. Like it's not about being good at something. I think that if we're given the instructions and told how to do it, we could do it. Like you're smart. You could do it.
Right.
Yeah. But it doesn't align with your soul.
No, totally.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's like I watched like 3 YouTube videos a couple days before it came out, and it was like, this is what you should do to market. And I was just like, okay, I can't do any of that.
Fuck it.
I can't do any of that. It's out. Like, hope you guys like it. And that for me was it's a different way of exactly what you just said. And for me, that's always been my path, is that since I was a little girl, if something doesn't align, it's just, I cannot do it. It just doesn't work. I'll try to, and I will very quickly get like rerouted and intercepted. And for me, the thing about the book that kept feeling true was that the book has its own life. And I mean, it's very much like with what people say when you put out a book, is that you birth it. And it's true, because it's not yours. Like it becomes its own essence. It becomes its own being. And that's how I feel about it. Like when I return to it and go and sit with it, I'm like, oh, hey, like you got all these like beautiful parts of you. Yeah. But it's a sacred object almost for me in that I get to look back on. But yeah, it was a strange process from it going after it went out. Like after it was published, it sort of just it had its own life, and I would be able to connect with it sometimes. But that's kind of how it's been since then. It's like, it's out. I think that, I know that it impacts people. And that's the thing, that every time I sit with it, I really do know that it's a beautiful, deeply powerful, impactful book. And that was also a really beautiful process for me, because if you really know me, you'll know that when it's so ironic that before this book, I self-published a book like 2015 called Living in the Light. How hilarious is that? And it's like because that was when I was a holistic nutritionist. It's like a cookbook. And that when I put that book out, I was at such a different point. I was like, 20. So different person.
That was like your podcast days?
It was my podcast days. Yeah.
with
Conscious
that
conversation.
Totally different headshot. Like, I don't even recognize
God,
you.
yeah.
I was looking at it today this morning because I was searching you on Spotify and I was like, oh my God.
Oh, yeah.
When is,
she goes
wow.
back.
Okay.
Damn. She's been around a while. Yeah. But I remember when I put that out, and I felt good about it, but I didn't feel a connection to it because I was more, even though I was still very much Chloe, like doing my own thing, I was more in the mainstream pipeline. And so, you know, I didn't have this deep connection with it. And with this book, now when I look at Living in Light, I'm like, oh, Chloe, you know, it's like when you look at like young pictures of yourself. Yeah. Oh, you're so cute. And I'm proud of you, but like, look at where you were. Whereas with this book, I really feel this like, reverence.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this book really represents something. So I'm sort of blown away that I created that, and that the people that came together, like Paulina, my best friend, who did the illustrations, like I love it. So yeah.
Yeah. And I'll still stand by what I've shared publicly before. I think it is literally the best written memoir. Like your storytelling is so captivating. I've never been so captivated by a book. Like, it's been a very long time for me to not want to put a book down.
Right.
And I didn't want to put your book down because I was like, oh my God, what happens next? Where does she go next? Where's this leading me? Oh my God.
What happens?
Like, what happens?
Yeah.
Really, really well done. And within the writing, because you are truly sharing your story from your heart, there are so many insights that become illuminated within that that I think are really, really important for people to hear, because I believe that the traditional memoir type, I mean, most people in personal development or spiritual development write a mix, right? Kind of like my book has like a bit of my life story and then some teachings.
Right.
And then when people try and do the memoir thing, sometimes they don't drop in deep enough into the darkness because they're so excited to just show everyone, here's where I was in the pain.
Right.
And then here's the big rock bottom and here's the climax. And this is where I am
now. Yeah.
Right. Whereas you didn't really do that in the book, which is representative of your work too. And, you know, we address a lot of the darkness in the last episode, but I want to touch on, because I think this is so important. You shared a very, very important distinction in that last episode that I think we need to like refresh.
Yeah.
And it was the distinction between like the darkness and working with the darkness and shadow work.
Yeah. I know, it's a big one. And I remember when we were talking about that, we were both like, yeah, right. And so basically in the previous episode, because and it's becoming illuminated or darkened more and more as years go by, because I think that light consciousness and the way that we approach spirituality is, you know, the veils are lifting in its own cycle. Like, I think it's happened in history before, and it's starting to happen again because we get this really big imbalance. And so for me, I see the concept of darkness. So in the spiritual world and like self-help healing industries, we always, whenever someone brings up darkness, people are always like talking about shadow work. That's usually what they talk about, right? And to me, they're different, because when we do that, we immediately villainize or make darkness this less counterpart to light. And in the work that I've done and the teachings that I've become integrated into, and the wisdom that my guides and my connection to my ancestors offers me, is this understanding that darkness has its own essence, and it's not a partner always to light, right? So when we look at shadow work, there's this understanding, and I'm just looking at the shadows that are in the room right now. Shadows get created when there's a relationship between light and dark, right? So the idea that when light projects onto an object, it creates a shadow. And so that is something that is different to when you're in a room that's completely dark. There are no shadows, right? So what happens when it's all darkness? And so for me, we always approach that from a place of like, like it's in our language. This was something that one of my teachers, my rune teacher, Ingrid Kincaid, really like, it was something that I was always curious about and exploring in my own mind, but didn't really know how to like anchor it into language and expression. But the idea of just paying attention to how we talk about and relate to darkness on a daily experience in our society. And you'll notice, I mean, just like paying attention for a day, just spend 12 hours paying attention to how often darkness is related to, you know, negativity, evil, yeah, anything that's bad or scary or dangerous. And you'll rarely, if not ever, notice someone talk about darkness in a way that's not charged. And that to me is an issue, and it's a huge issue because and in my personal experience, being super so sensitive to spirits and being aware of other energies around me as a kid, but also being in our world, I had through osmosis experienced this, or like absorbed this belief that what I was experiencing was bad. And what's crazy is that the deeper I go into my work and the more I especially connect to Nordic traditions and wisdom of like the northern territories in Europe and Scandinavia and the different historical, like mythological understandings, the more I start to realize that a lot of the beings that I noticed and felt when I was younger were actually some beings that I know now. And they're not bad, but they were being portrayed and through the world that I was living in. So I was scared of them. And I thought that they were monsters and these like evil beings that were coming to hurt me. But now I actually, like, one of them is actually one of my main guides. Right. So it's so interesting how like because I didn't know that, I basically was afraid. And that was something that I, like in the previous episode, we talk about how I had to go to the ranch to like basically meet all these beings and confront them. And it's our relationship to fear is like, we have to learn how to stand in our power. And, you know, it's like, you know, the idea of illuminating something, but what about if it's like in darkening it, like stand in the dark long enough to be able to see different, to adapt to whatever it is that you can't see or that you're sensing. Yeah. So, so I always like to think about darkness as also, I mean, nature is like my ultimate teacher. And I know it's like a popular thing to say nowadays, but I truly mean it. Yeah. And so it's like, when I go and sit in nature and I think about some of these concepts like light and dark or shadow, I look at animals and I'm like, do you guys have any feelings about like shadow and all this, right? Or like what happens at nighttime? There's even this like new show on Netflix. I forget what it's called, but it's like, it's all about all these like night, all the things that happen at night in different parts of the wild around the world. And it's like portrayed in this very dangerous, like sinister language. And I'm like, why are we doing this? Like, you know, it makes like lions seem like they're these like evil, right, you know, dangerous beings. And it's like, they're beings. This is how they live. They hunt and they you know, will track their victims, like their prey, right? But it's like we as humans have made everything that we don't understand or that we feel some sort of trepidation around as evil, and we attach this stuff to it. Yeah. Because we don't feel like we can control it. Yeah. Right? Yeah. And that is like essentially the foundation of it. But, you know, and then you start to see how that trickles down. And another piece that I think you watch 1923. Have you been watching 1923? It's like, so Yellowstone, you're like, what?
Oh my God, wait,
okay, so
what?
Yellowstone.
I love Yellowstone.
I know you do. That's why I'm like, hold on. So have you seen the prequel 1883?
Oh yeah, but I haven't seen, it's out?
So 1923
it's out already?
Is the second. So 1883, did you watch 1883 with us?
No. What?
Oh my, Ruby, what are you doing?
I don't know.
Okay, we have to stop like immediately. Okay, so.
Stop recording.
Yeah, that's it. We're going to be doing a Yellowstone powwow. So 1883 is the prequel, and it's like the story of the founding family of the Duttons who traveled across America from Texas to eventually Montana, and the story of them, you know, it's kind of like, what's it called? The wagons, the immigrant families, and just like, that's that story. That series is, or that season is the story. And it's so beautiful. And the main character, Elsa, you're just going to fall in love with her. And I feel like, I hope I'm Elsa, honestly.
Okay, well, I know what I'm doing this weekend.
So, yes.
Got it.
Once you're done that, then 1923 is the next season, which is the family, which is obviously progression of the time. And in 1923, Taylor Sheridan, the writer of Yellowstone, he's just, I mean, what you said about my memoir, thank you very much, in my writing. It's like the writer for Yellowstone I'm so inspired by him because he is willing to go where people are often not going. And this requires a deeper relationship with darkness, because like with my book, there were many moments where I wrote different parts of the story and I was like, can I put this in the book? Right.
Yeah.
But I'm like, it came through me. I have to. Right. It's not actually my choice. I have to trust what I'm getting. Definitely there were moments like, I don't know if you remember the scene where I was on like the rocking horse.
Yes.
Yeah. And I remember writing that and being like, fuck, this is kind of like really personal to put in my book. But
it feels like that's what you were saying about like human beings put the charge on everything.
Yes.
We put the emotional charge to everything. Right. Words included.
Right.
But it feels like what you're speaking of is like bringing the sense of neutrality to dark and light, and so that we can start to see it for what it truly is.
Right. Totally. So that we can be, because it's this idea that, I mean, like it connects to what I was what is going to with the 1923 thing. So in this season, he goes deeper into the story of the colonial Catholic schools coming into the territories, the native territories, and taking the children and putting them into Catholic schools. And it's very intense the way that he tells it, but I mean, you're like, this is definitely what happened for sure. So thank goodness someone is finally telling a version of truth, right? And in it, though, there's like the Catholic priests and nuns, and they're, you know, using rulers and smacking the girls across the head. And when they're using their language and they're like, don't use that foul, sinful, savage language, right? And it's like, you can see them trying to break their spirit. And to me, that it's like that, anything like that calls me so deeply, because it's this idea that our spirits have been broken by light consciousness. And they were even saying in it, like, you know, come to the light, let God save you in the light. And it's like, and I'm not bashing on light, like I love light, right? But it's this, but it's like, and I think that sometimes people wonder that, and I'm not like this dark being who hates light, but it's like, we need to tell the story. She's
not an entity.
Yeah, I'm not going to come and haunt you. But it's like, we need to tell the story that's not been told of the dark. And it's similar to what Taylor Sheridan is doing in his shows, I feel, is that he's telling the stories that haven't been told in his way. But I feel like he's probably doing a lot of research and trying to do it in as much respect as possible. But that to me is the darkness, is like the stuff that has been hidden. And it goes, I work with the runes a lot. A lot is the wrong word to use, deeply, intimately. And even with the runes, most people know of the runes as Odin's runes and the Elder Futhark. And there's, you know, the stories of the runes are very one-sided. But even with the runes, there's like the Elder Futhark set, but most sets don't actually include the giants, because the giants are sort of seen as like the sinister, you know, like ugly beings that Odin didn't, that Odin wanted to control, right? So they're even sort of forgotten, right? So it's like, that's the stuff that I'm very interested in always, is like, what's not being told, what stories are being left out, what are we not looking at by always seeing things this one way? And, you know, it's like paying attention as a writer, I'm always interested in language and paying attention to how words are being used to manipulate or control the narrative. Right. And so it's a big thing. And especially as a psychic as well, it's a thing as well, is like noticing where there's charge, because as energy healing, it's actually got nothing to do what the person's saying. It's all about like what charge is present in how they're feeling and what they're bringing forward. Yeah. Right. And if you are afraid of different things because of charges, then you're not going to be able to go deep enough to access the truth.
Yeah. Versus being curious about, oh, interesting, I'm feeling really emotionally charged about this word, or when someone's saying this word, something's happening inside my body. That's interesting. And really dropping into the curiosity versus the judgment of it. Totally. You know? Yeah. I feel like that's a good place to segue into, because there is a big emotional charge with this word. Witch. I have felt I've known, I think very soon after Chloe's countertop started to dissipate and Channeled by Chloe started coming out, it was in a lot of your shares, it was obvious that there was like the witchery part was coming through, more of the Nordic past. Like you were bringing a lot of that in, but without really saying it, and almost like just peppering it here and there. And then that started to become louder. And I feel like after you birthed your book, you were just like, fuck it. I'm just going to show up. Here I am. This is what I'm about, and this is what I do. And it felt so good to witness you do that, almost like a reclamation versus a statement versus a declaration. Like you were reclaiming something that for so long had been buried or hidden, or you felt like you had to hide. And in this, I mean, as much as you and I want to say we're not part of this quote unquote industry. Yeah. People lump us into that industry. Yeah. And when I say industry, I mean like personal development, coaching, spiritual, blah, 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 all that. Yeah. We don't really fit in there. We're like the misfits. Yeah. We're okay. We're in our own lane.
100%.
But to come out and say that, I have seen, and I know you've seen this too, a lot of people coming out over the past few years, like since 2020. There's almost been like this turbulent upheaval, which has caused people to go deeper into their truth, but it's also pushed people deeper into illusion and desperation. So now everyone can channel light beings. Now everyone can speak light language. Now everyone is, all the things. But I also started seeing like people claiming being a witch. Right. But it felt so off. Yeah. But for you, it feels like a reclamation. And I know that took a lot of, I'm going to assume courage to come out as a witch. Yeah. But I want to know what that process was like for you and why that felt really important.
Yeah. It's so fun to hear like others reflection of others. Cause when you're just when you're just doing your thing. So it's all, and I always, we've witnessed each other for, I mean, at least 5 years, but longer.
Are you kidding me?
So when I hear you say Chloe's countertop, I'm like, oh,
it's been like a decade.
Yeah. It's been a while. So yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I'm sure courage was there. I feel my mom, like because of my mom, like I grew up with a mom who was, and I write about this in my book.
I read about this in my book. I read about this.
I mean, I do read my book from time to time because I'm like, who wrote? Like, this is a great story. Wow. I mean, and I always loved memoirs. So they were always the books that I would read. And so, yeah, I read it. It's fine. So I wrote about it in the book because my mom was she was a witch. She was very witchy and, throughout my childhood. And where we lived in Malaysia, you know, in a expat community, lots of teachers. It was basically a mixture of teachers and oil and gas industry and diplomats. So not a lot of witches. And also a Muslim country, right? So like not a lot of witches. But my mom was like art teacher, music teacher, but we had like, our whole house was like, you know, covered in Buddhas. Like we had Buddhas all over the place, and other statues of like Lakshmi and Kali. I'm like, what's her name? So I was always surrounded by her and her expression. But when I was younger, because of the polarity of what I was experiencing and being a like very masculine dominant, male dominant world, her essence was really like interpreted as bad and weak and crazy. And because my mom was so not in a good place in her life, it manifested as that often. So it was like self-fulfilling prophecy, but she also never felt seen or heard. And that was just like being perpetuated through her experience and her family. But the thread of her, and I write in my book, so my mom has this birthmark across her like eye, her face. And it's like, it's pretty obvious. She's been covering it her whole life, but it's a really big part of her life that she's kept mostly hidden. Like most people have no idea. But I always remember when I was younger, like I would watch her, like put her makeup on every morning and I would, you know, sometimes ask her, but I always felt this, like, I felt so much shame with her around it. And I was in my 20s, I think, when mom did a reading. She was always doing readings with psychics and stuff. And she did a reading with this one medium who told her that she had been branded in a previous lifetime as a witch. And like,
goosebumps.
Yeah. And it was very much like, yeah, that's accurate for sure, because that was always something that we felt for her. So even though like I was, you know, holistic nutritionist, close countertop, yada, yada, like
super blonde,
yeah,
curl your
super
hair.
blonde. Yeah. You know, just like very
totally
girls and
different.
girl next door sort of vibes, which I think sometimes perhaps I still, there's that element of me always.
It was part of that season. Like
It was
nothing
definitely
is
part of
good
the
or bad
season.
or wrong
No.
or right. It's just the
We love her.
evolution.
She's great.
We love it all.
She's great.
We love her.
But the witch stuff was always there. It was just more on the inside.
Like you felt it at that time.
Yes.
In the era of Chloe's countertop, you knew she was there.
Yeah. And I mean, since I was little, like my brother would always be like, what are you doing, Chloe? Like,
so did it feel like you were doing what your mom was doing and putting the makeup on to cover it?
it wasn't something that I was conscious of, but
Right.
yes, for sure. Right. Like I had a lot of insecurities and I was very, I was very anxious. Like I was always really, because at the time I hadn't really embraced my gifts and my abilities as a psychic. So there was a lot of running away from that too. And all of these parts that are now so clearly a part of me were hidden with all the other stuff. So it's like Pandora's box. Like it was all in the box. And so, but I always remember that because my brother, I always refer it back to my brother because he's quite like quote unquote normal. And so he was always like, you know, he's surrounded by me and my mom and we were always, you know, and we were always like doing tarot and stuff and saying crazy things to him and whatnot. And so, but I remember,
God bless your brother.
yeah, he's a good guy. But the funny thing is that he pretends he's not like a wizard, and his wife is a psychic as well. So I'm like, come on, Sam.
Right.
But I always remember we were at a dinner in Vancouver with my mom and me and my mom, and my brother, and I forget what happened. We were in Yaletown for all your Vancouver peeps. But I said something to him and I was like, you know, I'm a witch, Sam, right? And he was like, Chloe, please don't. Like, and it was so funny because it was like just this moment. I think I had been going through some changes and it was just like, and he was like, no, Chloe, like, please stop. Like, cause he's like, I know this is who you are, but you know, Sam always would have this thing because of growing up with me that, you know, I can be kind of intense and it would manifest in like sort of intense ways. So he's like, what's going to happen? Like, what are you going to do next? So it was always there, but obviously with the book, and again, it was like sort of unconscious. I wasn't like, I'm going to write a psychic memoir, put it out, reclaim my title as Rune Witch,
right?
Start showing everyone.
It wasn't a marketing.
There wasn't like
strategy.
A timeline. Like on March 2nd, I'm gonna right. It was all just this natural evolution. I also feel that moving from Vancouver to Austin, something activated as well for me.
I also feel that in writing your memoir, like you said earlier, it felt, the parts of it felt traumatizing, but often we have to revisit our trauma in small doses to like kind of titrate ourselves into that experience again, but to also then navigate it from a different perspective, which then offers you a different perspective on who you be, right?
100%.
And it feels like that was also part of what, I don't know, led you into that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And there were times when I would write chapters of the book, especially the earlier chapters with stuff with guys and stuff where, and because I'm so visual, like I would, and in order to really, like with memoir, I did a writing retreat with Cheryl Strait in Greece, who wrote Wild, for 2 weeks, like, 7 years ago or something. And that was really powerful because it was like a intensive of really learning what it means to write, to show, not tell, which I always loved the concept of. And Taylor Sheridan does a brilliant job of this. But it's like so much in writing. And I think maybe this is kind of what you're talking about as well, right? With the reclamation versus the declaration. But it's like you are so tempted to just say like it was hot, but instead, to show and be like, he was dripping sweat, his shirt was stained at the pits, something like that. It's like, so it's like, it's tempting to just say it, but it's so much more powerful to allow yourself to immerse in the experience and like describe it and be in that.
I feel like that's the difference between like true embodiment and still trying to prove yourself, because the one that has to say it's hot, it was hot, is the one that's trying to prove like, no, but it was really hot. Like I'm telling you.
They want to get to the point of the story.
Right.
But it's like the person's not going to be with you if you don't really allow them to go there. So totally, it's memoir or show, not tell is very embodiment.
And maybe I'm remembering wrong, but I don't feel like I saw a singular post where it was like, hey everyone, I'm a witch. No, but there was this energy behind your content and your writing that began to shift. And I don't even know if you're conscious of it because you were in it. Right. Like as we're evolving, and if we let that evolution pour out of us versus trying to control it and hide it, we don't really notice.
No.
But from the outside, I started noticing your writing was changing. Things were almost becoming more poetic. Like there was a little more of showing and sharing of the witch side of you coming out. And then all of a sudden, now you've got these products and it's like full on witch.
Yeah. Yeah. None of it was planned. None of it was... there was no agenda behind it. And I do feel grateful because sometimes this comes up a lot. And for me, sometimes it always goes back to just like, this is who I always was as a kid. I would just do things. There was no like, I don't know if I should, like, what if this person thinks this? Sometimes that's there, but most of the time I'm just doing it. Like, if I'm like, okay, I saw a raven, time to get a raven tattoo. It's not like, should I though? What are people going to think? What if I don't like it at some point? Is this the right person? It's just like, this person shows up. Okay, can you do the raven tattoo? How do I pay? Like, it's just, I've always just been very much like, I don't overthink stuff. And so that's probably what comes through, is that it's just sort of like, wait, oh, okay, well, damn, like something's changed.
Right.
Because that is sort of, that's the rhythm of me. And I really feel that the more connected to nature I am, the more, because to me, we are all nature. And I don't just mean that from like a spiritual perspective of like, we're nature. Like, I actually mean that we are actually fucking nature. We're not like of or connected to, we are literally animals. Like, we are earth beings. We're not like, our bodies die and they go into the soil and they become like plants and other, we eat. It's like the concept that we eat our ancestors, right? Like, that's why I'm so drawn to the teachings of the North, because they're just so very real, and without the fluff and without the performance.
Right.
Like, I do not like performance.
No, fuck performance.
It really does not.
I wrote a book on it. Fuck it.
Straight up, you did. But it's like, that to me is like, the more we become integrated into the truth of that, not just the concept of it, then you can be that. And I just think about like animals. Animals are like, what's Johnny, what's the bird on the other branch gonna think if I like change my identity tomorrow? Like, they're just being, right? So, and I feel like we have the ability to be that. We just have been trained, and it's been batted or battered out of us, which goes back, like, kind of goes back to that, the story in 1923. Like, it really is visceral for me, like looking at how I always think about, I forget what era it is, but when men would wear the wigs with the white curls, and this like very civilized and all this, and I'm like, they were all hiding, like, and it's this idea that we're all hiding ourselves, and
with broken down spirits.
Yes. Like, and that's why I'm so drawn to the Mustang, because this concept of like, how when people train horses, they say they break them, right? And it's true. They really do break their spirits. And when I say I mean we, because I ride horses,
right,
and have bought horses. So I'm not separate from that. And I have dogs, that have domestic. It's like, there's the evolution of society, and I understand that, but I'm so drawn to the old ways, and I feel that old ways are being brought back because we're realizing how lost we've become, because we are constantly focused on the evolution and the advancement to basically erase death and become immortal beings. And it's like, okay, well, I'm actually not interested in that. I want to die at some point. I'm not trying to look like, legally blonde for 50 years. Like, so to me, that's like the teachings of the dark. It's like the concept that people want daylight all the time, right? Or they want, it's like, it's everywhere.
Right.
Right. So
yeah. Again, control, like trying to control, afraid of the uncertainty that, for example, nature brings, for example, darkness brings.
Right.
And I love that you shared with the product line, because I mean, I knew about it because I'm your friend, but I actually really felt that from you. Like, there was no real strategy plan. There was, but there wasn't, you're like, I'm building this website, it's going to go live soon, but there wasn't like a whole hoopla, like, this is how I'm going to do it. And this is, it just, ta-da, here it is. So I've always felt that from you. And I feel like that goes alongside the energetic frequency of staying in your own lane, which is also so important. And I know you've been riding it for a while, and I feel like I've been in and out of it for quite a few years. Yeah. And this year I'm like fully in it, and it feels so fucking good. And when I say stay in our own lanes, it's not like we're ignorant to everything around us. It's just like understanding who we are, where we stand, and what we're about. And that's really staying in your own lane, and then creating from that place, which I think is an important invitation for anyone listening or watching, is when you create from that place, it's easier to create from your own soul, from the depths of who you be versus from who you think you need to be. Right. Like, I don't think you would have, if you were trying to control how you're being perceived, I don't think you would have created conjuring oils.
No. Definitely not.
You know, or like witchy candles.
No.
It would have looked and felt really different. And I know, I think you did experience a little bit of like, what the fuck is this when you started putting it out?
Oh,
is that
totally.
right?
Still.
From people like anti-witch?
Well, I don't, and I think that I think that sometimes this makes me sound like full of myself, and it's so not, but it's just like people that are like that, they just don't come into my space.
Right.
And one of my friends, she asked me, she's like, do you get like people sending you like, you know, trolls and all this? And I'm like, no, I don't. I honestly don't. And she's like, I don't understand why. And I'm like, I just don't think that I think that it's like with the pasta thing, like maybe they tried to throw it but it just doesn't stick because I honestly don't care.
Because you're in your own lane.
I'm like, right. If you don't like it, then don't buy it. Right. And this is kind of where what I was saying in the beginning, like with the marketing of the book, like I can't do it. Like I just can't even, I'll try to, you know, so for instance, I've been getting a lot of people, including your lovely self, that are like, you should get your products in stores or in different places. And for me, I'm like, I tried it a little bit, but it's just like something about it is not resonating. And yesterday I picked up a bunch of my products from this lovely store but they had to shut down because they're changing their business model. And when I picked up the products, like I had this feeling that they just, because they're so they're very personal and they feel like my like little, you know, they all have like, I see all of the products, like all the candles, like they are actually representatives of beings that I've connected to and worked with. So like the weaver, like I know the weaver, right? Like it's not just like a candle. This is a being that's being represented through. So when you work with the weaver, you're working with the weaver. You know, the huntress, like these are all characters that I've sat with and worked with for months before they become these physical candles. And when I picked them up, I had this feeling of like, not that they weren't taken care of, but that they wanted to come home. Mm-hmm. And it was weird, but it kind of reminded me of like one of a friend of mine in Sweden, and she's a Nordic witch, and she's very specific about how she shares her creations, because they're very sacred in how she creates them. She works with her ancestors, how she packages them. It's all very slow, and there's so much reverence to the process. You can't be like, hey, can you like express ship it? She's like, no, I absolutely cannot, because you can't rush spirit. Mm-hmm. And that's sort of, it feels like that with these. Mm-hmm. But so that's kind of the thing that I feel like is sometimes it's almost like it ends up being a good quality of mine in the long run. But sometimes I'm like, I wish that I was sometimes a little bit more chill about the process. When someone's like, hey, do you want to like bring your stuff into my store? That I could like shut down that part of me that's like, it's not meant to be here.
Yeah.
Or, you know what I mean?
Yeah. But as you were saying that, I started I was reflecting on my own book process and then the process of creation as a whole. Mm-hmm. Because again, in our industry air quotes, everyone's creating something, right? You know, whether it's podcasts, videos, books, whatever it is, products, journals, whatever.
Yeah. Oracle decks.
Right. And it feels like people are just like creating and spewing shit out. Mm-hmm. And when I had my book come out, I mean, you remember this. I was like wanting to do a book launch, but I was not in a good place emotionally. And there was just a lot going on and didn't happen. And now when I look, and then I was supposed to do at the 1 year anniversary, I was planning a book launch, like a book anniversary party.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was just about to sign the contract for the location, and then Leia went missing. And I was like, okay, not going to do it now. Yeah. But now as I sit here, I reflect back and I'm like, no, but this is how it was meant to be. I mean, I never felt right about doing the influencer type event for my book, because my book is speaking against that. Yeah. So it never made sense. And 2, there's like a reverence that I really have for my book, which is what I hear you speak about with your products and your book. is like that real reverence for what it's become and what it is, versus like, here's something I did and this is how great it is. Like it can stand alone as something of quality, of value, and like something that is like this gift to the world. And I have found myself feeling so humbled anytime someone still shares my book, because I'm like, wow, it found its way to you. That's great. And I feel like that's what is happening now, and I'm honoring that more and more. And it goes back to what you were saying about humanity and us like evolving so rapidly. We're being pushed back to the old, slower way of doing things.
Right.
And that's also with creation, I believe, is like to create, but then to honor the process of creation, to the process of birthing that creation, and 3, of allowing that creation to weave its way without forcing it to happen.
Totally. Yeah. Well, and I think I've become really aware of that with a product-based business, because
I can't even imagine, by the way, what it's like to have a product-based business. I don't know how you do it.
Right before, as I was in the space of working with the concept of Nightwing Goods and like receiving the name, and, you know, it was like a year process from the point of thinking about it to the inception of the idea to creating a store and having products. But I had a couple conversations with other friends and mystics, and they were all like feeling this connection for me around like tangible product, like tangible, working with real physical, like earth almost, which is so funny because it was like the process, and I know you get this now, which is always so, it's interesting how aligned our journeys have been, right? But after Blue and Ollie dying, I talk about slow. Like I had to really allow so much time and space for myself to really walk through this massive initiation that was, that started with Blue, and Blue was really the catalyst for it, but then sort of like continued with Ollie. And those deaths were they're like to this day my biggest teachers. There's no words for what Blue taught me, and it's like it's been years, and I can immediately feel the intensity and the depth of what he taught me through his death. But it was like I had to go through this death process. And Ollie, I've had him for 13 years. So with him dying, I died, all 13 years of me died with Ollie. And, you know, talking about what you noticed in, you know, I guess how I showed up on social media, that really was completed with Ollie's death, because it was almost like Ollie knew that it was also all of this chapter had to close, and in order for it to close, he had to die. And that's kind of what it felt like. He was like, and that's why to me, animals are so, the contracts that we have with animals is so inexplainable, because they come with this knowing of what they're here to work with, what we're here to work with together. And, you know, it's like sometimes they're short and sometimes they're long, and we don't know. But when Ollie died, so much of me died, and I had to really go slow in that journey of like, I couldn't just like bounce back and do stuff. And I wanted to, I was like, oh, I have this idea for like, I wanted to do a group program or class, which I'm so done with, but called, I would keep trying to do them, and I'm like, why am this is not for me. But it was called the Conjurer's Workshop, and it was like for people to learn how to do spells and all this, and I was really excited about it. But it was like, again, it was like, no, it's not time. Like, you need to, people were signing up, so it wasn't that like people weren't signing up, people were signing up, but I was like, I can't do this right now. It's not time. I need to honor Ollie. And this was like 7 months after Ollie died. So there was definitely a slowness. And I think that journey, because I really didn't even allow it, just like walked it, allowed in this new chapter. And that was where Nightwing Goods showed up. And it was like, you're working with earth, you've walked through death. And so now you're going to start to create with your hands, and you're going to start to bring these teachings and this wisdom that you've learned and been initiated through, and start to actually bring it into the physical. And that's what Nightwing Goods has been for me, has been a way for me to really because Nightwing Goods challenges me for sure, in that it's like, yeah, sometimes I'm like, I honestly don't know if anyone's gonna fucking buy this. But truly, in true Chloe fashion, it's like, I'm obsessed with it, so I'm just gonna do it. And I tend to not overthink it. But there are things, it's the consumerism industry, and at first I was like, I think I texted you about this. It was like, you kind of just want to like put everything out immediately, and but very quickly you realize, and I think that I learned this with the book and everything, it's about what can you hold, and what are you willing, like what can you actually really stand with. And it's like, that takes something to hold in a sustainable way. And I think that's the key. And it goes back to what we're talking about, like been around for 10 years or whatever. Like a lot of people will do something and it's like very exciting and flashy and all this shit, but it's not sustainable because they haven't worked the foundation. They haven't walked in the dark so that they can hold.
Well, it's not coming from a place of solid foundation. It's coming from a place and of reverence, like a desire to achieve something,
make money, be famous, whatever,
be seen, be acknowledged, versus doing the work to be who you need to be to hold the space for that. And it is crazy how similar our journeys are. Like it's insane how similar our journeys are. And like with closing out this chapter with Leia, and again, I can't be super public about all the details, but very similar. There has been this slowing down process, and it's been part of my journey since I started doing plant medicine in 2018. So I feel like I've been in this 4-year death cycle, but the climax really was Leia. And I had been slowing down throughout those years. Like I went from doing videos every day, literally every day.
I remember.
Insane. 2 podcast episodes a week.
I know.
Insane. To now just being like, this feels good. This is what I'm going to do. I'm just going to take my time with this, even though this feels super exciting. I'm just going to like let it come when it needs to come, let it arrive when it needs to arrive. And even just before you showed up at the house today to record, I was telling Kevin and I were talking, and I was like, oh, Sage, my producer, we're just experimenting right now. And I'm not like, I don't need to have the new artwork out. I don't need to have everything perfect. Like, we're just going to take our time with it. And his face kind of like was a different expression. And I was like, are you proud of me? He's like, yeah, very proud of you.
Yeah.
It's just so different. And again, it's the letting go of the control, which I think human beings have brought in from the separation with nature, because nature is not controlled. And when we allow ourselves to do that, is it scary? Of course it is. And there's so much more possibility. And it feels, once you get past that initial fear, the shock, I think it's the shock to the body because you're not used to operating in this way. It feels really good. And then it becomes really easy to see what feels or feel what's aligned and what's not aligned.
Totally.
And so I think with your product line, like it's been really beautiful to witness you again, like just, okay, first here's my Witch's Brew, which by the way is Chloe's version of Agua de Florida for all my plant medicine ceremony friends. This is now what I've switched to. It is the best Florida water. It's also not filled with all the chemicals. And for those of you who don't know, Agua de Florida is super toxic.
Got lots of shit in there.
Hella toxic. Witch's Brew is not. But you started with that, and then I think you moved on to the conjuring oils or the candles. So like it was one at a time.
Well, so Witch's Brew I had out before Nightwing Goods started. So it was branded under Channel by Chloe. So that was kind of like me testing. Not even testing. It was just me doing shit and being like, oh, this is kind of fun. And like, I'm having fun making it and sending bottles to people and seeing people like it. Like that was kind of cool. And so then Nightwing Goods, like we had created, conjuring oils was the next thing that we branded, but we launched it all together. So the first when we launched the shop in October, it launched with the Weaver and our Black Vessel Night Seer candle, which was like, of course, got to have the Night Seer. And then we had the Conjuring Oils, Witch's Brew, and the tote bag. And then like in January, was it January? December, I think, we launched 4 new candles: Mustang, Songbird, Huntress, which are the colored 7-day.
Yeah.
And then the Coven is in the Black Vessel candle, which I really, the Coven, when we landed on that smell, it was like, this smell feels like it's going to be familiar to, like it smells different to every person. And it's a really beautiful candle. And then I also created a travel size for the Witch's Brew because people were like, I need to be able to bring this on the plane. And I was like,
I literally take Witch's Brew with me, the full size, because I didn't have the travel size.
We got to get you a travel size.
Everywhere.
I have
hotels, like when I travel, it comes with me.
Yeah. I mean, that was and that's the thing is, for me, is like, it's everything that you find in the shop is something that I am using all the time. And that because, and it's like how I roll. I can't create something that I'm not in love with.
And this is what I wanted to draw the point to, is to bring creation back to like creating from a place of creation versus from a place of force, versus from a place of trying to control optics, versus from a place of trying to prove who you are to the world. Yeah. But you're talking about creation from a place of joy, from a place of like what feels really good, what feels aligned, what is something that you would truly use and bring into your world and your life. Right. And then creating from that place, which feels like where we all ought to be, you know? But we've gotten things so twisted with just what the world has become, and the consumerism, that we've lost touch with that. So I love seeing you put your products, put Nightwing Goods out into the world from that place, because I think it's really felt. You know, even when I took Chloe to a few spots in Austin where I know the owners, and I was like, here, let me just try and pimp you out. I'll be the witch's pimp, right? And they were talking about the number of candles, and you literally, like, instead of being like, oh yeah, we can produce that, which is what most people will say, right? Like, oh, for sure, I'll get it done. I'll figure it out. Right. You're like, so I limit production because I really care about who buys the stuff. Like, it was literally something like that. And I was like, wow, look at her staying in her own fucking lane.
I know. Yeah. Well, and it's something that I've become, because we launched the shop in October, and then it was like Black Friday, Cyber Monday, all that shit. And I was like so overwhelmed by it. I didn't participate in any of it, but I just felt this like foreign energy come into me, being like, you know, if you're, it wasn't, I didn't think it, but it was like, you need to do something. And I was like, I am not doing this, because, you know, it felt so strange. And that's something that feels really important for me, because like people have been like, oh, you should get Witch's Brew in like Urban Outfitters and all this. And I'm like, and it goes back to like, the idea of these bottles sitting on a shelf for months, like, I don't know, it just doesn't feel right. Something about it doesn't feel in alignment. And, you know, our candles, like, they're poured by this one amazing woman, Steph, who is about to give birth any day. And I'm not going to say what the name of the baby is, but let's just say it's crazy and so connected to Nightwing Goods. But, you know, it's like this one woman, and she's pouring them, and we're working together. So it's like, I also don't want to be like stressing her out, right? Because I really, you know, so like one of our new candles that I just told you about before, I mean,
is it going to be out by this time?
Will it be out?
Can we talk about it?
It's April 3rd. If it's not out, it's like coming out very, 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 very soon. But I don't know if it'll definitely be out. But I can talk a little bit about it. I mean, it's a candle. So when these candles all came out, one of my guides is a very strong Nordic man from the past. And he's intense. Like and he's one of the ones that I didn't feel him so I think he was around when I was a kid, and I saw someone that reminded me of him, but I was afraid of him. And so he's kind of like been hiding for a lot of years, and he sort of, with my reclamation, he's like this, he started to emerge. And he's really a big part of the guiding force with Nightwing Goods. And he's like trying to get me to do some pretty, like, that's where I'm like, oh, I don't know if like I'm, it's like very intense creations that are really like, into the Nordic traditions. But one of the things that I was feeling was that I needed to have a candle that was super representative of death and the process, the journey of death, the importance of death. And it's like, I just did a conversation with one of my mediumship teachers the other week, and like on a live thing. And we were like, riffing on death. And she's like, we're those two weirdos who are like talking about death like it's like cupcakes. And it's like, I really love the conversation of death. I'm so drawn to it. I love death. I mean, it kind of sounds weird, but it's true, because for me, going through my own deaths and experiencing death, there's nothing that calls you in to the truth like death does. And whether it's a good death or a bad death, and that's also something around language, it's like the conversation where if it's like a child or like a teenager or a young adult or 30-year-old, 40-year-old, say they were too young to die. It's this idea again that we're so disconnected from the process of death, because I'm driving over here, dead skunk on the road, dead raccoon. It's like death is around us all the time, but we're so afraid to let it into our house. And that's like, I don't know if you remember in my book where when Ollie, when we put Ollie down, euthanized Ollie, the woman that did it, Ollie welcomed her into the house like, hey, come on in, right? And it was such a sacred moment for me, because I was like, Ollie is loving on this woman. And I believe that animals have deep wisdom and knowing. And Ollie, there were a lot of signs that showed up and stuff that he was communicating with me the days leading up to it, where he was like, I'm ready to go. Like, he had a huge tumor growing in his mouth. It was like necrotic tissue, and he loves food. So he was like, this isn't a nightmare. So it's like he welcomed death in and was like, grab a seat, come on in. And to me, like, that was it's so important. So this new candle is, even though I'm sure tons of people are not going to like it, and that's completely fine with me. Like, that was one of the things the candle maker, she was like, so she poured the first one, and she was like, this guy showed up. He's like a Nordic guy. I was like, oh yeah, that's him. Like, don't worry, that's my guide. And she went through this huge death process pouring the candle, where for a day she was sort of like out of sorts. And she's like, maybe we should put a warning on this candle. I was like, I mean, the warning is in the name, it's like, so yeah, we got a death candle coming. But that's the thing I can't make stuff based on the idea that maybe people will like it or not. No. It's just like, I'm making it because I'm being guided to make it, and I'm feeling excitement around making it. And that's, hopefully people like it, but honestly, if they don't, it's fine. I don't care. Yeah. Because I do.
Exactly. Again, bringing joy back into creation and bringing creation into alignment with,
right,
our truths.
Yeah.
We can, as always, talk forever.
Yeah. Episode 4.
There'll be a part 4 coming up. So as we are nearing the completion of this specific episode, I would love for you to share one potent truth that you want to leave our listeners and our viewers with.
I would say right now, I mean, just what we're just talking about, I would say, that sounded very Canadian. Just talking about it. Be willing to do what others won't like. Yeah.
Yeah. Simple, short, to the point.
Yeah.
I love that.
Sort of wraps it up.
Yeah. Yeah. So for your products, people can head to Nightwing Goods, which I'm super excited. All of the links are going to be in the show notes, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on a platform. And We can also follow you on Instagram, channeled by Chloe. FYI, there's only one real account. There's a bunch of fakers. Fuck the fakers.
Yeah.
Her channeled by Chloe. There's no underscores.
No double E, no double C.
There's no weird numbers. There's no underscores. There's no spaces. It's just channeled by Chloe. But thank you so much for being here again, despite all the tech issues we had before hitting record.
I'm fine with it.
Thank you for being you. Thank you for being the embodiment of like your truth, because that really is reflected in the work that you're doing in the world. And it probably is inspiring a lot more people than you know, for people witnessing you standing your truth so boldly and just being in your own lane and enjoying your creativity. Like that is so refreshing from what everyone else is doing. So thank you for being that.
Thank you so much, Ruby. And I was feeling into this before, and I just seeing you evolve and walking through what you've walked through. I'm loving who you're stepping into. It feels really powerful, and you're so generous. Like your spirit is so generous. And I think that's part of why you're guided to work with leaders, because you can see how much you light up about sharing others with the world. Like you see people's gifts. You're very good at being able to see how people are, like what their gifts are and what makes them unique. And it's really beautiful. And I can see that it's becoming more potent. So yeah, I'm really honored. And thank you for having me here 3 times.
Round 4 coming soon.
Coming soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you loved this episode with me and Chloe, you will love the other episodes linked right here. Don't forget to hit subscribe so you're notified when new episodes go live. If you have any questions, comments, or insights that you'd like to share, drop them in the comment section below. And be sure to tune in next Monday for a brand new episode of Potent Truth. Aho, family.